You're back. You're back in the
Back
office.
back in the office, huh?
Back in the saddle again.
Yeah, back in the saddle.
How's your developing attitude about being a therapist?
It's not good.
Maybe not, maybe more honest.
I think more aware and then just yeah, I don't know if the past was not honest, but I just couldn't see a lot of the stuff.
Okay, that's probably more accurate, but
Yeah.
um
But yes, more honest about the human qualities of it. Yeah.
yeah, you and I are the two worst. The
Horrible.
worst in the community about having taken on shit,
Horrible.
thinking we're cool, we can do it.
That reminds me. Yeah, you're doing so good, man. I'm so impressed on Saturday the way you shifted the so much. Like you really just got everybody was, you're just doing so much less. It's so much so nice.
Oh, Sam, thank you.
And it's pleasantly surprising that everyone's just rocking. Like ideas are flowing and
Yeah, except for Eric, who's like having an existential crisis and thinks
I know, man.
that he
Eric is
knows
suffering.
less than people, which is fucking ridiculous. Can you just consider for a moment, just for a moment, what it means to know the idea of mind first and body first, and how that affects every single relationship you'll ever have, sit with, every client? I mean, the thing is that I don't think that people take in mostly in an everyday way how different this is from the other 8 billion people to not know this.
Yeah. I
Even
have no
even
access.
I'm just beginning to realize that, you know?
Yeah.
So maybe, Eric, you're having a crisis of honesty where you're realizing that fractals are infinitely complex and you'll never know them, even not even half, not even a quarter. So how about you speak? Because your face is saying a lot, but your words are not coming out.
Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I told Sam last night that it doesn't really feel like not knowing. It feels like I'm between spaces and it's very painful.
Ah, I can,
What was that word you used? Liminal? Like you're limit you said liminal?
yeah. You know the origin of that, Sam?
What's that? What's the etymology of it?
That's in the second book.
Liminal is?
That's right. Liminal.
I don't have the second book. What I hear about?
The successor to Immanuel Kant. Who
Oh,
was
he's
that? Herbart?
Herbart.
Right. He did I was inspired by two things that he did. The first thing is that he's the first person to formally describe a line between the conscious and unconscious.
Okay.
So the limen is the line between those things. Sub
Limit.
Subliminal means below the
Oh,
line,
subliminal.
means below the line.
That's interesting. I was even trying to do that yesterday of trying to find another word that's like liminal. I'm like, liminal, limerence. Like I'm like, I
Limit, but limit,
limit.
limitation.
Okay. Yeah, that was a good word.
So Eric, in some way that I'm not sure, well, let me go slower. I think the path that I'm taking now is one that can only have come from me suffering terribly, and especially with Hannah, but not just with Hannah. This path of what should I expect myself to be able to know?
Hmm.
And so um, I don't think I'm having. Okay, let me do it differently. I Can you imagine that when I first discovered my first things in 1996 and 97 tried to bring them to places like rehabs and offer them for free to people. And I got annihilated. People screamed at me, "What the fuck do you know?" in groups. I don't mean therapy groups. I mean teaching therapists. I got fucking hated for this, for knowing these things. And then it was startles and emergence, two qualities, which are the fundamental things of, you know, everything. you know. If what I said on Saturday, that was my original thing. What is an emergence? It's seeing the wound. Seeing is not knowing about it, it's seeing it as it's happening, which is exactly the same thing as the word healing. Seeing the wound equals healing, equals personal learning, equals becoming more conscious, and those four things together create love. So that's the first couple of years. So I'm looking at this thing as like, oh my goodness, look at what all this is. All the rest, the personality didn't happen yet. And I'm taking a beating. Well, what do you think it was like for me to take a beating? Not just a beating. What do you think it was like for me to, on the one side, think, I have discovered something so amazing it could change the world, and maybe I'm full of shit. Maybe everybody else is right. Maybe the stuff that they already know, who am I to think that I know more? So
Mm.
I don't know the specifics of what you're experiencing, but my experience of being between the worlds lasted at least 5 years. You can see it in my writing from the early things on the website because my early writings often has a prefaces, in my opinion, as far as I can see, like all the socially correct things to not look like I'm saying I know something. And I eventually got beaten so much that I went, if I'm going to get beaten anyway, I'm going to stop doing that shit. Of course, then I got beaten worse and in many ways, but in some ways it pushed me into realizing that my goal can't be to bring this into the world in a broad sense. My goal has to be to bring this to a few people who will then teach it to more people than I can teach, and maybe something will last. And you're one of those people, Eric. And why am I saying you're one of those people? Because you're in the university? No, no. You'd be surprised why. I'm saying it because of what you're going through right now.
Mm.
See, I don't think that everybody in our community will ever have the crisis you're having right now. Can you see my tears? Because, Eric, there's something about you that's more honest in some way about how the pain of how this is a fight between what's claimed to be true and what I'm claiming to be true. And the personal experience of emergence is such that when something emerges in you, you can't let it go. But it doesn't mean that that erases all the other stuff that people say is true. It doesn't, which is in part why I try to pick words for my maps that people already in some way know, but they're not filled with baggage. It's painful. So I thought that I was doing pretty well about this until about 4 years ago when I met Hannah, and Hannah is the world's greatest skeptic. When she's mad about it, she's viciously skeptical, probably cynical. But it's changed over time where she and I are more in the middle, but she is always going to be more skeptical, and I am always going to be more naive. And that's just the truth. Sam, you are naive,
Of
just
course.
like me.
Of
You
course.
know, you're like a gentle little boy, just like me, who just like tries to go out into the world with kindness. And
Yep.
we wrong-headedly think that the kindness, people will see it, you know. But Eric, you're in that part where
By the way, Eric messaged after we met and said, "Thank you for the kindness." Literally, so Eric could see the kindness.
this morning Hannah sent me the reading this morning. It was on the 11th step. And I said, when I can remember this, it's really so helpful, but I mostly forget it, and she wrote back and said that basically that's just human to forget. Yeah. And I wrote back and I said, yeah, and I think the remembering only happens when somebody else is kind to us.
Mm.
That our evidence
Wow.
in 11th step is through the kindness of others. It's not in us. The way that
Wow.
the steps are presented, they are often presented or experienced as if it's up to us
Mm.
rather than it's, up to each of us rather than it's up to pairs of us.
Mm.
I don't think that I can remember without. I mean, yeah,
I mean, it starts with we, the first line, right?
but it's not experienced like that often, Eric.
No, no, what you're saying is
It wasn't written
unique.
like that to begin with, which in some way I can understand. Take responsibility for your problems, but take responsibility means for me now more than ever, let down my guard, take a look at my own limitations, and not in some logical way. Hannah and I had a talk last night, which ranks among the best I've ever had with a person, not her as my partner or anything, as a person. And we spoke about what we spoke about in the group on Saturday.
Mm.
And she said, could I, talk about that with you? She asked, not me. And she began to talk about what the things that she remembered from the first year in the university with her and Ellen and Blythe, the first year. I was just floored by how much she remembered, but more by the idea that she said, remembered how I addressed their school injuries in
Right.
the first months. And I didn't remember doing that. But every single person who meets me after their initial, whatever, amazement about something, falls back into the thing of, is this a cult? Is this bullshit? Is this true? And almost no person uses evidence to judge that. Almost everybody uses influence. Yeah. And that included me at the beginning. I went through this.
Mm.
I kept thinking if I got some famous person to champion this, that's how it would come into the world, meaning, how naive was I?
I can
All,
understand.
all it did is piss them off. Who the fuck are you? Because it meant that they had to look at their own work and go, oh, it's
Oh
built
no.
on it's
Fuck no.
built on sand.
No. Nope. Nope.
So Sam, can you remember what it was like for you at the beginning? I mean, obviously, what happened with you is a more idealized path because of the pain you were in and you're breaking down and so breaking down means you have less barriers. You're more willing to try to hear.
I came in with the max amount of skepticism, I can tell you that. I mean, but part of that was because of the way my father was pitching the thing. I tried everything to be okay. Every hours of meditation, every book, not hours, years, And he kept
Yeah,
saying, just go to this guy, one session, you'll be better.
yeah,
Which is stupid as fuck.
but
And it's
that's your
not
father.
true. No, but that made me not go. I resisted for over a year. I would tell him, because you know how he is. If you mention any suffering, like I told him my throat was fucked up. And he said, did you try Ricola? I'm like, Dad, I've been Ricola. Anyway, so I'm mentioning, I'm panicked, I'm disassociated, I'm, catatonic. And he's going, you just got to go to Steve and pack. He's just, you'll be fixed in one session. He kept telling me the story about how because he got rid of his vertigo in
That's
one.
right.
That was true for him. He had vertigo for
Okay.
30 years and he had an emergence and the vertigo
Yeah.
never reappeared.
And that happened in 9 minutes.
Right. So for him, it was like, the magical code of Joe, whatever, but that was the wind up. And then I'm door seven. So I mean, Steve would say all manner of things that I didn't know, but I felt like I would argue all the time because I'd be like, I know everything he would say. I feel like I would know it already or something about it or, just impossible. But I don't know. That's sort of the beginning. But there's also things like there was some things that were effortless, like character type. I had so much disorganized data that I'd collected about myself and other people that when he talked character type, I was like, I'm a two, this person's a one. I knew immediately some ones. Like there was so much data and it was just organized that like Linny's a one, Danny Tone's a one, I'm a two, you know. It was almost amazing. It was
And
amazing.
yet, at the same time, then the horror comes when I say it's not behavior, it's urges,
Sure.
which I didn't talk about when you learned
No,
that.
you didn't have that language. I just knew the essence of the thing somehow. The essence. There's tons of other people that I thought about their behavior and got really confused, but I do remember that just the two that are one of the one and the two. The rest of it, no. And just the really obvious two and the really obvious one. Like back then I was an obvious two, I think.
And
Now,
and the idea that so much gets missed or forgotten, which is the idea that I drew on the things from 200 years before about narcissistic and neurotic.
oh yeah. I
It
think
wasn't
about that.
me just dividing that. And
I still
Carl
use
Jung's
that.
introvert and extrovert are exactly the same pattern. People just judge it differently because of they see it as behavior.
Mm.
So, and that you commented early on many times, Sam, about how I always credit people with the pieces that I drew on,
Oh yeah. And it's been so important for me to read those people's work myself so that I can. And I often start with them and finish with you. I don't do it the other direction.
which is as it should be. But
Right.
your story first.
That's true. Yeah, I start with Narcissus and Echo and whatever, all that stuff.
But Eric, this crisis, so a person who had this crisis differently than you, like you're having this in a very broad sense, a person who had this is Finn. And Finn had this because he started going out with a one, Kavalina, and within, I don't know, 5 or 6 weeks, she said to him, everything I'm saying is bullshit. You're getting fooled, right? And by this point, he had come to me for 4 or 5 years, and he had come to me the year after his father died. So in some sense, I picked up that baton. And for him to think, can this person be deceiving me about everything? And we had an hour session where it was very painful for both of us, but I just let him break down and say, this. And I did not defend at all this stuff at all. And he came out the other side, to his credit. Um, but it's not the same as what you're having. That was provoked by one person. The things that you're having are in part provoked by your own mind. It's important for you to see my reaction or Sam's, which is that we're not trying to convince you of anything, Eric. I'm simply trying to say, I think I know that feeling. I had it for years. That's it. And I think what I started to say is over the past 4 months with Hannah, or over the past more than 2 years, I have had Hannah say things to me that have been that have undermined my confidence so many times, like her asking me, do I think I'm God? But she didn't say it with anger. She said it, how can I be certain of the things I know?
Mm.
And that pressured me into recognizing the stuff about fractal patterns, and you can only know a small percentage. They're
Mm.
recognizable, but you can't know how they're going to move forward in time. You can know the possibilities, but you cannot know which one's going to happen.
Mm.
But what was really something, Sam, last night was here's Hannah telling me that this stuff from 5 years ago. And the amount of things that she said to me
Mm.
that about emergence, the amount of patterns that are still in her, I just kept crying.
I can understand that.
I mean, it just floored me. I had no idea. Yeah, the hard thing about this is, look, if our wound symptoms or are wounds a kind of pattern, fractal pattern behind your thoughts that involves getting startled. Okay, those two things are so different, they're mutually exclusive. If a wound is symptoms, and getting rid of the symptoms is healing. And if getting rid of the symptoms is healing, inevitably they return in some different form. So what does that mean? You heal and then it goes backwards? What does asymptomatic mean? You have a wound, but you can't see the symptoms, but symptoms are the defining quality of a wound? Okay. Or is a wound, getting startled? And is the wound
Or reliving one.
what's that?
I'm just saying, or reliving one.
Yeah, getting wounded and reliving a wound, two different patterns, but so they're mutually exclusive. That's the problem. It's not built on what exists and it's a tweak. It's saying the thing that exists is wrong. And that's the thing that causes the crisis right from the beginning. How can I be saying that all of this, the entire way that the civilized world treats everything, both physical and mental problems, is wrong?
Mm.
And I'm saying, yes, it is. That it has to be torn down and rebuilt from the bottom up for it to be real. So this is a thing that causes a crisis that's beyond, I'm seen as so arrogant. Is it arrogance if it's true? No, that's the thing. Arrogance is something about something that's not true.
Mm.
It's a false knowing. It's a defensiveness. Is the candle flame lit? Is the candle lit or not? That's the kind of knowing that I believe in, which then rules out 99% of the rest of knowing. I can't know.
Can you clarify something?
Sure.
How is symptoms mutually exclusive from injury?
Okay. This is a good question.
Great. I have the same question.
So the things in emergence that are described are the natural patterns of thought, a natural pattern. So a pattern is not an actual instance. In other words, and this is a stretch, but try to stay with it. The pattern that I learned this from is the ancient Greeks' idea of a square.
Okay.
So a square is a pattern. I mean, would you agree, Eric? A square is a
Yeah.
pattern, but rarely do people see the spiritual nature of patterns. When Parmenides talked about that truth never changes, it's an ideal form that has always been there and is forever there. It so mirrors things like Immanuel Kant's thing that there are a priori patterns, that they exist before any instance of behavior. right? Without a prior thing, a priori in Latin, without any prior instance. So the pattern of wounding, getting a wound, is one of the four patterns of change in emergence. But just take that one, the pattern of getting a wound, the pattern exists like a square. So I'm going to ask you a series of a few questions and do your best to watch how it unfolds. It's not a trick. Okay. I want you to picture a square. And in order to do that, picture a piece of paper in your mind. What color is the paper?
White.
Okay. What shape is the page?
It's a rectangle.
Great. Is it have rounded or square edges?
Squared.
Does it have the binder holes in it or no holes?
No holes.
Okay, great. So now on that page, I want you to see now a square drawn on the page. What color is the square?
Black. Lined.
Okay, thick or thin?
Thin.
Okay. Now hold the image as much as you can because I'm now going to ask you a series of removal questions. I want
Hmm.
you to take away the page, but keep the square. Can you do that?
Yeah.
Great. So you can see a thin black lined square in the air, but no page, correct?
Hmm.
Is that thing still a square, even though it's not on a page? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's a simple question, but it's not something people think about. But now I'm going to ask you the critical question. Does the definition square have a color? Is there a color included in the definition?
No.
Okay, now take away the black and tell me, is the square still there?
It's gone.
No, it's not. That's the thing, Eric. Right there. The pattern of a square exists without any existence in this world. That's what Parmenides taught.
Mm.
Can you see that?
Hmm.
Brilliant. That's all the patterns I teach. They're squares. They exist without any color, any instance, any weight, any, it's on a surface, no matter where they exist. And so the pattern of wounding in emergence is a 3 to 5 seconds of rapid elevation of mood, followed by a sudden loss of all awareness, followed by a slow blank recovery. That pattern of 3 steps has been what I've been saying for close to 30 years. The
Mm.
pattern is a square. The pattern I'm saying exists without any person getting wounded, without any behavior, without any experience. If there were no human beings left to get wounded, the pattern of getting wounded for humans would still exist, just like the square.
Mm. Mm.
So now, what is a symptom? See, a symptom is not a pattern. A symptom is anything that a person experiences as suffering, which gets a man-made determination that it is a symptom. This is important. The idea of clinical depression is a man-made symptom. If you have a dog that you have had for 13 years and you love your dog dies, it gets hit by a car right in front of you, and you have depression for months, is it a symptom? Yes or no? And it is a man-made determination as to whether that's a natural occurrence or it's a symptom, because symptoms are man-made. It's a determination that men make up. The natural pattern of suffering does not say that the suffering is symptoms,
Mm.
because The word symptom is short for a phrase, a symptom of. It's not just a symptom, it's a symptom of, and now a man-made condition. A man-made word or words that describe a condition. This is a hard concept too. It is not a natural pattern. There is a natural pattern of loss that includes a loss of dynamic range as far as mood, a sustained, significant loss of dynamic range in your moods. The word depression. I'd never said it this way. This is me on the fly, but that's what it is. That's a natural pattern. It's a square. Do you have to have sadness or depression or whatever for the pattern of depression to exist? No. And unusually, it's a well-named pattern because D is from in Latin, and press is to make into a smaller space. So this condition, this pattern is from your moods getting pressed into a small space. Well named. That's a square. But is it a symptom or not? Even the shitty diagnostic manual says that it has to be a significant amount, even though it's vaguely defined and whatever, it doesn't tip. A symptom is a man-made idea. And a symptom of a man-made condition, an idea, a reference to a condition. These are man-made things. They don't really exist. Do they serve a purpose? Yes. Just like David Hume says that we, even though cause and effect can never be seen, it serves us to imagine that it does. And so, in some sense, even though symptoms don't really exist as a natural occurrence, it serves us to believe they do. But can you, in this little 25 minutes, see, am I answering your question? How are symptoms different from the wound?
I I feel like I moved towards your answer from where I was.
That, okay, that's good, Eric. So listen, let me go back to this. So I'm speaking slowly, not because of you, because I prefer this now, right? And I'm saying things as they come to me. There's nothing memorized for me. I've never described, I've never put together this set of things in this way before. I've spoken about them in a much larger sense. That somehow the pieces all go into the picture. But this idea about the square, Eric, is the foundation of everything in emergence. I have a drawing in the library, the sequence of panels that show the square. And in a slower manner, take away the pieces. To the ancient Greeks, and I skipped this part with you, a square didn't have lines. A square was imaginary points in the air, equally distanced from each other with equal angles. But it still was a pattern that existed without any physical existence. The square existed when you took away every other thing. And I don't bother with that because it's too complicated. Just to get a person to say, wait, a square was something where there was either imaginary points in the air. Yeah, that's what it was. So now for us, it's an imaginary thing with lines. Okay, doesn't make any difference. But think about what I'm saying to you. This is in line, this doesn't start with me. Although I don't agree with Kant that everything is logical, I agree with him that there are patterns that exist a priori, that they exist without us ever knowing about them. They exist before we're aware of them. Whether we're ever aware of them or not, they exist. And one of those patterns is the pattern of getting wounded. But there is no such thing as a pattern of symptoms because there's no line drawn between what are natural, what's natural suffering and what is pathological suffering. There's no line. Not at
So
least.
how is a block marker different than a symptom?
Okay. To go, don't, I
Before I
want,
do, okay. So
wait, okay. So what I'm trying to say to you, Eric, is the square in and of itself, if that's all I did with you in this 2 hours, it would change your life. And you might, on your own, come to the things that I have come to. That's a claim that's huge. That without me even telling you the rest about wounds, if you understood the square, you'd begin to look for the patterns in the mind. Because you would see there is a geometry in the mind, just like there's a geometry in the physical world. And emergence in the way that I am describing it is a geometry in the mind. No coincidence that it's physically represented by logical geometry, by a particular way of using squares. Can you now see there's a spiritual connection between the ancient Greeks' idea of a square and the geometry that defines everything we talk about? There's a spiritual nature to the square that changed my life.
Hmm.
I was so affected by learning about the 6th century Greek ideas. And even Pythagoras, in some ways, is said to have given credit to having learned these things from Egyptians, which I love that idea. In part, this is also the origin of my seeing that physics, starting with the Greeks, and the patterns, the invisible patterns that the mind has, are the same because the mind creates geometry, creates buildings, creates objects. And where do we draw on? A priori. We draw on the patterns we already have in us.
hmm.
Why are your things that are on your wall framed in rectangles? I would say to you that it is a pattern that exists in the mind a priori. It exists before there were ever any frames. It just happens to be one of the shapes that is pleasing to us. By what?
Yeah,
By our nature.
we live in boxes mostly.
We live in boxes. A famous thing from Jesus, I can't even remember the architect's name. It- um, early 1900s. What's the guy's name?
In Spain?
Who?
What country is he from? In America?
Lloyd
Yeah,
Wright?
yeah, Frank Lloyd Wright.
Oh, okay.
Right. So a famous quote that he said was, before him, the guy had some arrogance. He had balls, I'll tell you. Um, Before him, all buildings were simply um, square shapes with different different buildings with different size holes in them, square shaped holes in them. And
Yeah.
he's right. But think of the idea now based on what I've told you about squares, Eric. His ability to see outside of what was conventional comes from the idea of him drawing on the a priori shapes in the mind, which we are civilized into not doing. Instead of us having that deeply spiritual experience of seeing that a square doesn't exist in our world, but only imperfect manifestations of the square can come into this world. Again, that's Parmenides. That that anything that we create is an imperfect representation of a perfect a priori shape. And that's true.
I the thing I thought about was like Sam's throat is sore.
Sam's
That's
what?
my throat.
Sam Sam has the sore throat, and that's a symptom.
No, I don't know. It's an experience.
I don't know. What I'm saying is that a symptom that Sam's like if we're using it as the comparison.
Good, 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 Eric. Good. Now,
Yeah.
can you see the difficulty is that whenever it's a man-made pattern, is going to include that iffiness. Okay, so in listening to I don't remember the guy's name, Arkham something, Sam,
I
the
missed what you're saying
physicist,
because I was coughing.
the physicist that I mentioned that Kurt Jumanjal interviewed from Israel,
The weak measurement theory.
the weak measurement theory,
What's the
right?
fucking that? What's the
So
fuck is that guy's
that
name? Something like
Ar-
Occam. Yeah.
Arkham, okay. So anyway, the point is that here's a quantum physicist who's I listened to, and from listening to him, I recognized a thing that another way to say a recognizable pattern, which I wrote down as fractal determinism, as opposed to man-made determinism. Man-made determinism is that if you could, as a person, know every starting point, you could determine how the future is going to be. That's a man-made idea. Why is it man-made? Because it involves linearity. It involves the lack of change. It involves the pattern is going to go forward exactly as we see it now. This is a man-made idea because it's linear. There are no straight lines in nature. There are no lines. Everything is an imperfect manifestation of an a priori form. Plato says the same thing. He calls it the realm of the forms. So in some sense, all of emergence, the patterns we teach, are the realm of the forms. Again, drawing on now 5th century Greek philosophy. Okay, but going back to Sam's throat. Okay, my throat is a little sore right now. I would be said to have a sore throat. Before the idea of saying you had a sore throat, this experience existed. But at some
Yeah.
point, medical people, and that word is important, med in Latin means to measure. So medical is people who measure health. Meditation is people who measure their minds. So, but in this case, medical people determine it to be a condition. Well, how do you know you have the condition? And then they give you this list of symptoms.
Yeah, I realize that as a symptom is what's his, let me see. A symptom is always a story. I don't think you can have a scene that's a symptom. See, I don't think you can have that.
I don't think so. Sam, I think a symptom is always a scene. It's a snapshot. It's not something that's necessarily changing.
But if I was to describe this scene, I could really go into detail of what is going on in my throat. Like it feels like there's three small slits, and it feels like there's sand in the slits, is how I would describe it.
Okay, yes.
That's an
And the
experience.
short statement of it is medically you have a sore throat. But there's no story because there's no before and there's no after. A
Okay.
story has a before and after. This is a scene.
I see, I see, I see.
This is a snapshot where you draw on the facts
Is
and then
there
you
an
give the idea.
is th so there is there outer layer scene? Can I be in an outer layer scene? Or like a inference about the scene, an inference in the
In
scene.
some sense, Sam, and we're losing Eric,
All right, okay, oh, yeah, I know.
but in some sense, the map that I
No.
sent out, everything on the
What do
right
you say?
side is a scene, everything on the left side is story, right? And on the scene side, facts are the things you can see, right? And so those are largely inner layers.
And so I'm doing an idea when I say a th sore
And the
throat.
idea is the outer layer stuff,
Okay.
which is a reference to the inner layer stuff.
Okay. Yeah,
Does
so
that
that
make
makes
sense?
perfect sense. That makes perfect sense, of course. Perfect, literally. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
But this idea, okay, Eric, do you know um, about the history of the diagnosis hysteria?
Hmm.
I have a lot of pre-learning on it. Um,
Tell me what you know.
I know about like Vienna culture and women who were not really allowed to have jobs and work, and that, they would have these sort of crazed symptoms of being unable to like function in some ways. And, the at the time, I think they thought it was something to do with sex. There was some sort of repressed sexual assault or some sort of incident that happened in their lives that forced them to, have this craziness be manifest.
Hmm.
And I'm seeing Brewer and Bertha Poppenheim, who's Anna O, referred to Anna O, and their like crazy relationship.
Hmm.
Hysteria was in the fucking DSM, if I
Okay, so
remember.
let's go slowly because it's complicated what you just said. So first complication is that, and please hear this in the spirit I'm saying it with kindness, Eric. By your very nature, you have been indoctrinated to believe in cause and effect. And you state it as cause and effect rather than just state it as even as a symptom and a condition. You state it as cause and effect to even start your description. This is important because of all the things that I have a difficult time getting people to do, it's letting go of that. That a square doesn't have a cause. The square simply exists a priori. It doesn't have a cause. An instance, a real world manifestation of a square may have what looks like a cause, which we kind of assign because of motive or need or something else. But truthfully, If it had a cause, it would mean that you could define all the properties that caused it to come into existence. Well, that's not possible. But leave that. Cause and effect is a huge topic. But if we go by the thing that you just said and we eliminate the culture at the time as a causative factor, it's unnecessary. It's like the black lines that make the square. Okay, the pattern, hysteria. Can you just describe the pattern? Best you can.
I mean, I can only see like this sort of interpretation of mania, like manic states, like where they're
That's pretty good, Eric. You just surprised me pleasantly. That's pretty good. That's you being you.
Yeah, I would have
That's
said
you, the intelligent man. Stop, Sam. That's you, the intelligent man, capable of your own thought, which is oppressed constantly in you by the world, by relationships around you, by experiences of school. Right. What you just did is you just let yourself be, exist. That came from you. That was good. What else can you say?
I don't know. I mean, to me, there's like a distortion, some sort of like distortion to the like your interactions with people. Like I mean, the idea of hysteria makes me think of hysterical,
But it
which is
has other words, Eric. And I'm not trying to do it to confuse you. I'm trying to wake up a curiosity in you about looking up words, the origins, because hysteresis is a property of physics. There
mhm.
are motors that are called hysteresis motors. Okay. So I want you to see that when basically, if you were to listen back to this, pieces of what you say are indistinguishable by other patterns, like a pattern of, I'm making it this up, a pattern of craziness in your relationships, which includes mania, which is not untrue, but it's not measurable when there are so many other things that could fit. It points to the imperfection of words, like Wittgenstein said, but it also points to the idea that it's man-made things. The words are referring to a man-made description of a natural thing, as opposed to just a label for the natural thing. Okay, why am I bringing this up? Because late 1800s, early 1900s, when this was in fashion, critical, medical people gave these women who had large emotional outbursts, they gave it a medical name. They said it is a condition. They, men, literally men, gave it a name, hysteria. Now, at the time, late 1800s, there was a huge increase in the amount of women who had hysteria, diagnosable hysteria. Did you know that? You're not going to see a reference to it in 1700 or probably even 1800. But by the mid to late 1800s, you have these references to a treatable condition by medical doctors called hysteria. Do men have hysteria? You don't see anything written about it. It's women, so it's a sexist um, condition. Only women can have this, right? And hysterectomy comes directly from hysteria,
Mm.
where they're said if you have a hysterectomy, this
No
gets rid
cure.
of your hysteria.
Right.
And so many women had hysterectomies because they had hysteria.
People still have hysterectomies for PMDD.
Exactly, Sam. Now you're saying how it continues 200 years later, even though whatever. But now watch what I'm going to say. How do I know it's a man-made condition? How do I know that's not just a label like the Campbell
Literally,
is
literally
lit,
man-made.
right? How do I know that? How can I prove that in a way that's indisputable? Okay. Toward the end of the 1800s and into the beginning of the 1900s, there were people who spoke up, medical people, who said there is no such condition. Guess what happened, Eric?
We got toasted.
The incidence of hysteria, diagnosable hysteria, disappeared. Almost overnight, women no longer had the diagnosable condition of hysteria. Where did it go? Well, it's not there anymore
It
because it
became
wasn't
PMDD.
exactly. But it became a man-made, obviously a man-made condition because can you make the idea that the candle is lit go away? No, that's because it's a natural pattern. But the idea that there's a diagnosable condition in women called hysteria went away. People attempted to do this in the late 20th century about ADD. And I believe that in some sense, the way they were describing it, it should go away. But I use ADD in my four autisms because I'm drawing on people's former work, but it's not treated as a medical condition. It's treated as a minority personality. And there are descriptors that say, well, here are the logically geometric patterns that that you use to measure the condition. Exactly like measuring whether a candle is lit or not. A simple description that the social priority of freedom eclipses the other three social priorities that in social situations the person has a significant inability to exist socially. There's no man-made pattern. So again, this idea of whether this is all real or not, or whether it's bullshit, or whether you're being fooled, or whether it's a cult, or everything else, I have asked repeatedly since you have known me, please ask me for my evidence. This is not a fake thing where I'm going to punish you for not agreeing with me. I get excited when you have your own ideas. I don't get excited when you parrot things that I say. Now, I want to be say something that it may not be occurring to you. Eric, there is such a variation in people's ability to learn in our community that half the people that I said this to would not follow even the square thing. I'm not sure that Lexi or Jesse or Linda or Sarah could follow this. Why am I saying that? To diminish them? Not at all. Not at all, Eric. I'm saying it for you to see that you are on the side of the line where you're having the crisis because you so actually want to know the truth about all this stuff. It's not just you want to know it because you can use it as a therapist or something. You actually want to know the truth. That's why you're having an existential crisis. You are not an ordinary man, Eric. You're not. And because of that, you're not an ordinary sufferer. You suffer things that normal people blow right past. But realize that in our community, that I am like you, that I want to know the truth. I don't want to know the answer. That I want to have something where I don't have to keep rethinking it or adding new pieces of it to make it true. A lit candle, I don't need to add anything to it. A 5-year-old knows that it's true or not. Knows that. A 5-year-old. A 5-year-old never has to be taught more. You don't have to memorize anything. Well, why? Because if I was to do the experiment with you like a square, but I was to picture a candle flame lit, and I was to say, take away the candle, can you still see the flame? Take away the wick, can you still see the flame? Take away the room it's in, can you still see the flame? Take away the color. I'm not sure you can take away the color. Take away the heat. I don't think you can take away the heat. But in the same means of a square, a natural pattern exists in a way that's outside of our world, a priori. It exists, whether we ever see an instance of it or not. It exists. Does hysteria exist? No, not as a medical condition.
The symptoms might
But
point to something.
but the symptoms are the outgrowth of the man-made condition.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, in thinking about Sam's sore throat, right? If we went back in time, I would say, well, Sam, your humors are out of balance. You have
But can you see, wait, but can you see that what Galen is talking about here has a quality that I've drawn on? Even if I don't believe in black bile, the idea that Galen said that there are a priori qualities in our nature, and that there are, how many of them, Eric? 4.
four.
And that those 4 qualities in various combinations contribute to our well-being or lack thereof. He's not saying cause. There's no story in it. He's saying they exist. There's no story about the idea of a square. It exists. And each of the patterns in emergence is like this. It simply exists a priori before, and there's nothing that precedes the thing. It just exists. And realize, Sam, if you haven't, that you can tell that something isn't a story if it's a priori without a precedent. All stories have a precedent. There's something that precedes the thing now. There's something that precedes the outcome. There's a series of precedents. That's what creates the story.
Hume didn't believe in a priori fucking stuff. Did you know that?
Okay, but there was a reason why he wrote about it, because you're taking that somewhat out of context.
Yeah, well, that's very out of context. Yeah,
But Hume was an empiricist.
right.
And so what he said is that it's a waste of time to think about the stuff in the
That's
mind
right.
separate from
Same
the
as cause
world.
and effect. He said it's possible, but it's not knowable by the human mind.
Exactly. But Hume was saying that because his preference was to limit your
That's
evidence
what you
to
can say.
physical things. Okay.
I get that.
And Sam, that has value. Do I want
Oh
to?
yeah, I think the quantum guy wouldn't have discovered the guy on Helgoland if he didn't stick to just observable things. He wouldn't have made his bigger discovery.
Well, more than that.
Heisenberg.
The guy in Helgoland, Heisenberg,
Yeah.
right? The story is important.
You mean why he was there or just in general?
Okay, so consider Heisenberg like you, Eric, and consider me like Bohr. And
Okay.
Heisenberg, a young Heisenberg, comes to Bohr and has ideas.
He's 23 years old.
And what are the ideas about? Well, the ideas are about the atom, the actual truth about the a priori pattern we refer to as atoms. So here's Bohr, who arrives at Rutherford's lab. Rutherford does the amazing work on electrons that fucks up J.J. Thomson, who thinks that the atom is a pudding with shit embedded in it. And Rutherford sees atoms as particles. And then Bohr sees the particles like a solar system and really demonstrates this with proofs for the hydrogen atom, but it doesn't work with any other element. And then Heisenberg comes along and says, well, I have an explanation for the shit that your model doesn't include. And Heisenberg, this young lion, is fucking pissed because Bohr dismisses him. Rutherford is the most too fatherly person for physicists of all time. He makes everybody go out and play sports at lunchtime as a team. He's fucking brilliant. It's emotional to think about the kindness of that man. But here's Bohr, and Bohr grew up in a very rich family, and his father was a famous philologist or something who had some of the greatest minds of Europe come to dinner. And so, Bohr sat there and heard all these discussions. Right. So Bohr tortured Rutherford with his ideas. So it was only karma that Heisenberg comes along and tortures Bohr with his ideas. And so he's trying to get accepted. And he also has severe allergies. So he's physically suffering and goes to Helgoland to be able to think straight because of his allergies. And he comes up with, independently of anybody else, a new kind of math, which already existed, but he didn't know that, and he invented it called matrix algebra. Doesn't matter what it is. It's a new kind of math. Right. And so this idea that these people are developing these things because they're having existential crises, Eric, is my point for telling you this,
Oh, Heisenberg was having a terrible existential crisis.
which Bohr also had with Rutherford, which Rutherford also had with J.J. Thomson. And here is a series of four men who develop from beginning to end for the first time since Democritus, 6th century BC, an idea that there are fundamental particles in the world that make up things. What does it in the end become, Eric? Which they don't talk about? It becomes the square. It becomes that the pattern of atoms exists without ever having any atoms. That's what they argue about. I'm welling up because you can understand what I just said, and it is so difficult to get a person to see. That what these people are looking for is squares, a priori patterns. Even Hume is looking for the a priori pattern of trying to understand what's real. And he's saying that the place to find it is in physical things. And he's not wrong.
No.
By reverse engineering the physical things, we can be led to the a priori patterns. But people don't reverse symptoms, Eric. They take the symptoms to be the end point and the condition to be the collective name for the group of symptoms. And neither one of those things is true. They're man-made ideas, man-made. And you can tell they're man-made every time because there's a linearity involved. Sore throats. How many variations of sore throats are there? Infinite. How many
Yeah.
variations of the medical condition? None. Sore throat.
Yeah, like I'm not sick. Mine came from acid reflux. I mean, that's just even that is
There you go. Exactly, Sam.
yeah, I'm not
And
sick.
my sore throat comes from talking too much.
But even acid reflux, there's 800 million. I mean, it's just even that's a symptom and that's another, whatever, rabbit hole of nothing.
So what Sam's saying, Eric, even though you probably follow his words fine, is Sam and I have a common admiration for David Hume's idea about that cause and effect is a man-made idea. It's people wishing for order where there's not order. It makes us feel safer.
Well,
Yeah.
he would have loved the genuine evidence versus inferred evidence. I mean, that would have been right up his alley in Emergence in the most recent in the diagnostic manual. He would have loved that.
Well, what this later thing, which again, the words are difficult to say something is man-made determinism versus natural determinism. Okay, natural determinism is that I know the progress of a candle flame as a priori pattern, but the specifics I can never know. Not even the next minute can I tell which direction the flame will blow in. Not. But the natural determinism is what I can determine because that exists outside of the real world. That exists a priori. That's just simply the nature of a lit candle. And all the patterns that emergence is interested in are a priori patterns. I don't care about the rest. They're not knowable. And that to me is a humility that if you don't accept that, that you can't learn the truth about anything. That if you cannot honestly say, I can with very clear ideas say, I can't know these things. I can't, which is not from me. This is from Descartes, who said we can either know something is true or we can know we can't know. And that is different than any other philosopher who says we can know it's true or we can know it's false. We cannot know it's false, but we can know we can't know. That's an underlying thing in emergence. That we can know the candle is lit, but we cannot know the on not even 1 minute into the future.
Yeah, I mean,
Exactly.
this is Niels Bohr versus Einstein. I mean,
Yes.
like
Although Niels Bohr's thing goes further, according to Arkham, the guy in Israel, than is necessary.
I like that guy. I watched, I don't know, 20 minutes of it, and then I read, I don't know, 30 minutes about weak measurement theory, which is really fucking interesting. And yeah, I don't know. That guy's interesting.
So now, Eric, when you hear these things and it causes you to go blank, it's because you're seen first. Sam changed the scene without giving you a,
Uh,
a warning. And Sam, this is the single most important thing that I have ever learned with Hannah.
hmm.
If I'm going to do that, I have to say it. And if she's going to do it with me, she says it. And I can't tell you how that has just changed everything about us.
Hmm.
So, what I'm trying to say, Eric, is you have an a priori pattern in your personality that I'm referring to as you are seen first. This is something in you that isn't going away because it's your nature. What does it mean? Well, it simply means that when you when somebody changes the subject like Sam, you will go blank.
Hmm.
There is no possibility that there won't be some degree of blankness. It could be 10 seconds. It could be you can't come back on your own, but you will go blank. But lest you think that you're inferior to a person who's story first, realize that when you're immersed in a scene, Sam can go there with you, but if he goes there, he'll lose the story.
Hmm.
He'll become immersed in the scene and lose the story.
Mm-hmm.
And so if he attempts to go back to remember what was being talked about, the story, he'll go blank every single time, at least for some brief time, or sometimes he won't be able to remember what we were talking about on his own.
Huh.
So in some sense, Eric, I am simply learning to help and ask for help with each of my relationships with this idea. When you change the scene, tell me you're going to do that. And when I'm changing the story, I'll try and give you a heads up best I can, which I've tried to do at various times this morning with you.
This fits too with what I texted Sam Saturday,
Okay.
and I said that, I mean, he was like, Clancy said she wants to give you a hug. And then um I was like, I don't feel like it's that I don't know. I feel like I can't get on. There's like a merry-go-round and I can't get on it. And a lot of the suffering that I have feels like that like somebody's like, hey, we're talking about this thing, we're doing this thing, and but it's moving and I can't figure out how, where, like I feel like it has to stop so I can get on.
That's true. Do you hear what I just said? It
Mhm.
has to stop for you to get on. That's true. You're not taking it in. It's okay. You're telling me the experience of it, but you're not. It seems impossible for you to take in what I just said. You have to stop in order to get on. That's true. And it's true for every scene first person. And it's exceedingly true for scene people like Lexi and Jesse. They may get one single scene out of a 2 or 3 hour group, and the rest of the time they're lost.
Mm.
Sam,
Is it possible Linda and Sarah are a story?
you know, I'm still learning to see the pattern past the first piece.
Okay.
I know, Sam, that you're story. You may go, but wait, sometimes I'm immersed in scenes, and yes, you are. But we're talking about what is your, okay, let me go slow because it's developing. That quality, scene story orientation, is measurable only in normal social relationships. What does this mean? It means that it's not measurable when you're a therapist.
Yeah, that I know because I'm in a trance.
So, normal social relationships.
Yeah, I'm not in a trance. I'm in a normal social relationship.
So, you could be watching a movie and it draws you in and you're so immersed in the scene. Any kind of, you know, uh, healthy adult can do that. All healthy adults can do that. Right. If a person has that condition where you can't picture, it's harder. but there's still the blind person's immersion, where you're not picturing specifics, but you are experiencing nonetheless.
Mm.
But it's only measurable, Sam, in ordinary situations. What am I like ordinarily? Well, I never stop telling stories. I'm constantly doing that. But when I'm telling stories, I alternate between the story and a scene, a particular scene. So I know that I'm story first, scene second. That's because in my ordinary social relationships, it exists like that. I think you're story. Despite this difference, I think that, okay, and Hannah is scene first, story second,
Like Clancy.
and Clancy. But all four of us, when we are in that condition of trying to help somebody, fluidly move between the two things.
Yeah, I mean, I see Eric fluidly move when he's helping Sarah in group or something.
Exactly. Exactly. But Eric, I think that you are scene first, story second. But this is beginning. Do I know what Linda and Sarah are? I know they're story first, but I don't know the second thing. I think they probably are story second because unless you pressure them, they don't go into scenes. Now, remember the condition for measurement: normal
Social.
social relationship. It's not by themselves. Social means they're interacting with another person. And normal, not as a therapist, not some special condition, not meditating.
Hmm. I have to think about it. I'm not sure, but it's not like hard to see myself as story, but I'll have to. I do so much scenes that I'll have to pay attention to myself in my social life specifically and watch what it's like.
Absolutely, Sam.
Yeah. It's
And
just,
add
yeah,
to
it's hard because so much of my life is my work, so it's like really hard to parse it out.
of course, and you're hearing the way that
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
saying it
Oh,
well.
so I know it's automatically asterisks. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
More than that, the idea that I am beginning to think that um, story is a minority scene story orientation.
That's cute.
That it is the smallest of the four.
Hmm, interesting.
And it may be that scene is third, and then scene story is second. I mean, story scene is second, and scene story is first, the largest group. But I am not sure yet. I know the distribution is not even.
I'm not sure about Linda. Linda might be story scene. I think Sarah could be story though.
Same.
Do you
I
think the
feel
same?
that way. I
Yeah.
feel that way, yeah.
Yeah, Sarah has a resistance to the scene that I do, where there's just you have to pressure the shit out of her to get her into the
That's
scene.
good, Sam. You just gave me an aha. Wow. You and Sarah both need to be pushed to go into the scene if you're in a story.
Yes, if we're locked in, if we're not connected or some other state of mind, that's not a normal.
Okay, Eric, I want you to take some time now to consider in this hour and a half, how many of the ideas do you think most people would understand? And understand doesn't mean given enough time. I mean, in an hour and a half, Eric. How many things which we have talked about in an hour and a half would most people be able to understand in the hour and a half?
Hmm.
That was a promising
I think maybe the only thing that sticks out is the man-made, that men made hysteria, like literal men, like
literally.
that. I think they might be able to jump on that.
They could get that idea. Normal
I don't know
people
about the symptom wound thing. I think
just
people would just
no
get totally
way.
lost.
The square, definitely not the square either.
That cause and effect isn't real,
Oh
that
fuck
symptoms
no.
are man-made.
Even being
That-
open to that idea, they wouldn't even be open to it, let alone understand it.
No,
I mean, I think there's some sort of like people who may have pre-learning about how a lot of things are labels. Like this is really just a label. It's not the act. It's pointing to something. May get a little bit,
but is the
but
label pointing to a natural pattern, or is the label pointing to a man-made pattern?
yeah, no, I mean, that's what I think we were looking at today is like what the label is. What is the label? Is it pointing to something that we're putting a label? Is it a label on a label?
There and in Emergence, in the first book, a label on a label of a man-made thing is called a synthetic idea. It's an idea about an idea. It's
Yeah,
literally existed for almost 30 years. It just, there are other words that come up to describe the same idea. But I'm trying to get across, Eric, your measurement of your intelligence and what's true, there are two different things, is largely based on um, knowledge that does not include scene story orientation. Your If you don't include that, then your going away is a lack of intelligence or a lack of effort or a lack of something. But if you take in that you are seen first and you're sitting with two story first men, and we are talking about things that are philosophically at the highest possible level that you could go. This is at the level of the people who are the great philosophers. And no surprise, because Sam and I are both drawing on the great philosophers. This is not us making this up. This is us, in some sense, constellating what's come before us into kind of meta ideas of the meta patterns that they talked about. Like we're talking about the nature of the atom. We're talking about the nature of the square philosophically. We're talking about the nature of symptoms and medicine itself. Does medicine just simply exist because people make up categories of suffering?
Hmm.
There's so many things here. And the things that are really important are the things that challenge the assumptions, the things that people assume, cause and effect, that there's no such thing as a priori um, patterns. Like even Hume said there aren't, but I think he more said they're not practical to think about. People can say
Yeah,
that,
that's kind of like the Buddha, the Buddha wouldn't answer certain questions because he didn't see the practicality of thinking about them. Like, is there a God? He just wouldn't answer.
and in some sense, you can understand the practical implications of that.
Mm.
But after all, Hume was a practical man.
He was so practical.
So, but even seeing that here we're talking about drawing from Kant, who I find abominable in some ways because he's basically saying everything is logical, which just makes me throw up.
It's funny, I was just thinking about him. I was having some conversation with when I was learning about the weak measurement theory, I was just talking to ChatGPT, just asking it about the literal research about it. But then afterwards I got into a thing about which philosophers are the people think are autistic, you know? And Kant is the one that is the most thought of as autistic. Anyway, so I was just thinking about him yesterday. But the evidence they give is all behavior. Like he was perfectly routined. He would never do anything off of his route. He was the most predictable person ever, which fits the logical thing you're saying. They're saying he was the most predictable philosopher and how he behaved as a
That's such a bizarre distortion of autism.
yes. But
I'm
they
no
also
no
said his
no no no
obsession
no.
with his
Slow
work
down,
or
slow
whatever.
down. Why am I saying that? Why am I saying it's bizarre? And why am I saying it's distorted?
Well, I can
Because
understand.
that's like saying every dark-skinned man has a big
I
dick.
know. I know. That's stupid.
No, it's not stupid. It's human. It's a pattern in human nature to draw those big conclusions. Watch this, Sam.
Okay.
Who else is straight out of a textbook autistic? A
Wittgenstein.
philosopher. Who?
Wittgenstein.
Good. Who else?
Socrates to me is autistic. Yeah.
Who?
Socrates,
Good. Who else? You're doing great. Who else? Okay, let's just pick one more.
Nietzsche,
Okay. Excellent. 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 So Kant, who was the second one?
Socrates, Wittgenstein, and Nietzsche.
Okay. So now think of the difference between Nietzsche and Kant. Do they look the same?
No, they're so different.
But they're that the rigidity, the precise use of language.
Oh, that's the same. Oh, yeah, that's absolutely.
Wittgenstein, arguably the most precise language, he wrote a book about saying it's stupid to talk. And if you
Yeah.
can't use precise language, you should shut the fuck up.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
like autism on steroids.
Yes.
And Socrates, right? He fucking drinks the hemlock because the words
I know.
are more important than his life.
Yeah, correct. That's one of the dumber deaths.
And yet, are those people the same at all?
No,
No.
just the only thing is the language and the desire to understand is the only thing they have in common. It's very clear they wanted to understand. That's irrefutable.
It's very clear that each of them had an existential crisis.
Oh, that too.
Kant's is the most invisible because we don't see how he transitioned from an ordinary man to a philosopher late in life.
Right.
There's no book that I have seen that says, how did that happen? And I don't mean cause and effect. I mean just
But
simply,
Wittgenstein crashed out completely. I
right.
mean, he just like quit being a philosopher. He was an architect. I mean, he just
Yeah.
met. And Socrates was in a fucking war. I mean, he was,
Well, he's in a war, but he was also married to a woman who was a borderline, like Lincoln, and the provocation of that.
there's some quote that's like the fastest way to enlightenment is to date a crazy woman. I can't remember. Like, because they'll shut all the doors, they'll lock all the doors, and the only escape is inside of yourself.
That's interesting, Sam. You know who said that?
No, I don't remember who said that. I'll try to find.
Imagine like Hemingway might have said something
Yeah,
like that.
something. Somebody like that.
But so now look at what you're saying, Sam, and I'm not saying Kant isn't autistic. What I'm
No.
saying to you is it's the candle flame, and you pick the one that looks most like the textbook version of Kanner's autism,
Mm.
where he's really
Managing.
the rituals, like people said that he walked his dog and you could set your clock by when he walked his dog. Um,
Right. Mm.
you wonder what put those four people into a scene in heaven. What kind of conversation would they have?
I think about that
And
all the time.
yeah.
All the time. I think about them, for some of them learning emergence all the time. I wonder who would be open, who would be arrogant. It's hard to know. I know Socrates would talk to us because he was so door number one that he just would because he talked to people that had all manner of ideas. He was not like he was so not arrogant in
Do you know
any of this
what's
stuff.
interesting? I just had an aha about Socrates, as Plato describes him, because we don't
Right,
really
sure,
know.
as Plato described.
But the other three would have all argued that their viewpoint was the correct one. All three of them would argue from door number seven.
I don't doubt that because Yeah, and Socrates would just try. I mean, there's a way that in which he can find what's impossible to know. Like he was good at sussing out what you can't know and exposing it. But with our theory, it just doesn't work because it's just candle flame shit. So he'd be fucked, you know?
It would be interesting if
It was
Socrates' method would work on Socrates.
That's right. That's right.
And look, and it would be things that he would know because he would know the Pythagorean stuff
He would know a lot of it.
and Democritus, and all those people from which I draw on.
Yeah.
I didn't come up with that stuff.
Yeah, I think he's the only one that would just like wander around and be like, "Hey, let's talk about something."
You
Like
talk to
just
anybody.
Okay,
You talk to
he would
anybody.
do this because he liked the idea of being able to take arrogant door number seven people and get them to be exposed. He would be interesting with the other three.
Yeah, he would.
His method would probably expose the door number seven and the other three.
Hmm.
Although I think Wittgenstein would be as bad as Socrates' wife.
I wonder if that's a pair of opposites though, like with the way he did things, and then you have this whole like the sophists who were trying to come up with all these rules of like linear rules of
Yeah, man-made.
yeah.
This is what he made fun of, that those people made man-made philosophy.
I think I just had an aha because I feel like a lot of my suffering is that I'm looking for some sort of rules for myself that'll allow me to use the square in my life, and it's like they're incompatible,
Yes, that's
and
right.
it's like fuck, and I don't know. I'm like, and so
But
I'm
Eric,
constantly
more than that, I know I am interrupting, more important. You're having the entire world reinforce your own insecurity that you can see it when you're clear by yourself. You can see it. I'm not having to persuade you about the thing about the square. There's no argument. It's like the candle flame. But then when the world drowns you in all these things where they're saying, but in order for us to believe it's true, you have to prove that we are wrong. That's the error that I lived with for most of my life. That in order to see that I have something that's real, I have to prove that everybody else is wrong. And that's not true.
Mm,
In fact, the more I try to prove that other people are wrong, the more I drown in their bullshit. Because how do you prove that something is wrong when you can't even get it to stand still and say what it is? It's a moving target.
I actually feel like really angry even thinking about that like that there's that in order to make something or to say something, it has to be in opposition to something else, and it can't just stand on its own.
But the go slow with that because um, everything in emergence is pairs of opposites. But the pairs of opposites, okay, think of the square the way that I have gotten you to see it this morning. Okay, an a priori idea is only a priori if things that exist have a precedence. It's only by comparison to the things that do have a precedence. So, in one sense, it's saying this pair is the things that come before anything is made, the patterns, and then the examples that we make using those patterns. The precedent is the a priori, the without precedent patterns. And the patterns that have a precedence are the things we make. That pair of opposites must exist together in order to have a priori have a meaning. If you don't think about that I'm saying something that we don't normally think about, that a square exists without any instances of it in the universe. If you don't think about that it exists in the universe, then you can't think about that something happens before that. And the pair. So what we're saying is that everything in emergence has a pair of opposites. But an oppositeness isn't the idea that the thing is man-made, even though there's something about that that's opposite. The thing that a human being makes is so incomplete that arguing is forever, because there's like all these loopholes, and they go to like meanings of words, and the argument just becomes a horrible, horrible, like you're in a net or something, like a fish trapped in a net. There's no clarity. When you say the idea of symptoms is a man-made idea, and the idea of symptoms emerges from the man-made idea of a condition, holy shit. But in order to do that, you have to then say, well, so what do we do when I'm sick? Don't I have to use the symptoms? And yes, you do. Because it's not me saying that the stuff has no use. It's me saying that it's not true, but the model has enough value that we can use it. We can't live without it. That's what Hume said. Cause and effect isn't real, but the idea that we treat it as if it is useful up to a
Or
point.
like if a cat eats some plant, it dies or something, like that's a useful piece of information.
Yeah.
You don't buy the plant if you have the cat. It's like that's
But
useful.
in that case, this is a natural sequence. It's not cause and effect. It's the nature of the cat to die if it eats arsenic. So is the cause of death arsenic?
No,
No,
the cause of death is the cat's nature related to arsenic, right?
but it isn't a cause. To talk about it is an oxymoron. It doesn't make sense to say it's caused, because cause is something that precedes literally this thing.
Right.
Whereas we're saying when the cat eats the arsenic, it begins to die. We're saying that it's correlated. That's not cause.
I
Cause is
guess
separate.
I don't know the tipping point between correlation and causality, I don't think.
Yeah. Correlation exists in a scene. Causation exists in a story.
Oh God, no wonder I had such a proclivity for causation.
But
Yeah.
but I've never said that before. I've never thought that before. It's emerging from this conversation.
Interesting. That makes sense. I mean, me and Sarah are pretty pushy about causality, or Sarah's, yeah, because yeah, that makes sense. Because of before and then the after and
It
it
may be
naturally.
that Linda is chasing every detail because she wants to understand cause.
Hmm.
I don't know. So I'm going to ask, think about this, Eric. Please don't just answer blindly. This is probably the best description of the basic of emergence that I've ever made. Can I put this in the library?
Yeah.
Is it okay with you, Sam?
Yeah, I don't think we touched on anything that's
Yeah, I'm good
This
with this.
this is brilliant
in my memory. Yeah.
because it touches on so many things that people, if they could pre-learn this, maybe they could come to the 8 basic lessons having some pre-learning for what's going to happen. Because a lot of it, they're not going to be able to think and absorb on the fly.
Yeah.
Most people haven't studied a lot of philosophy. Some people, but most have not. It's only the people who really want to know the truth that end up doing these esoteric kinds of comparisons. Even if people learn philosophy, they usually learn a favorite and then defend that against the others.
Right. You get in a family group with the Kantians or whatever I still have my question. And maybe we
What's
can
your
meet another
what's
time,
a question?
which is what's the difference between a symptom and a block marker?
Hmm. You want an answer?
Yeah, I mean, of course I do, but I don't know if I don't know if that's better or it's better to wind it up for a bit or let me, bake on it.
Okay.
Unless if there's something really like precise that's just
Oh,
in
it's
the
just
chamber.
obvious.
Okay, so then I want to know, yeah, because it'll probably give me an aha. I'll probably be surprised.
Okay. The way to determine this is to ask yourself if in this situation, this condition, this whatever, is there a square? So I am going to say to you that, right, a block marker,
Or
which is,
squares.
for instance, an overreaction to an ordinary life event.
Hmm. Underreacting to a loving event is a square for sure.
Okay. Now you take that pair of opposites, okay? You can go through all 12 and ask yourself, is this a priori in the mind? Is this pattern that's described by the sentence a priori?
Hmm.
That's the question. You're asking the tipping point, Sam. I'm giving you the tipping point.
Yeah, that's a very useful tool. Yeah, that's a very useful tool. It's not like effortless to determine whether it exists, but it helps a lot to think about, okay, you know,
Is this a pattern that those words are describing that exists outside of any actual event?
of course, if I go to an alien world, that pattern would be relevant still.
Well, that's
Assuming there's love,
assuming there is a knowable nature,
right?
because you have to have that in order to see an over and under reaction.
Sure.
But, and somebody might say, but how do you make that a tipping point? Well, there is a tipping point, is an a priori idea. Whether we know it or not,
That idea of underreacting to a loving event, even if that never happened in me and Eric's relationship, it exists.
exactly.
The possibility of it is absolutely
It
endless.
happened yesterday. What the fuck?
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm picking it because it's an obvious one. It's true.
But
But
with
it
that,
exists.
Sam, is that a sufficient beginning point for you to process the block markers?
Yeah, I think I'll just go. I mean, I know what page they're on in the therapy book. I could just go one by one and just
Okay, you know
go.
what? You know one of your favorite pages, which is the outer layer descriptions,
Yeah.
right? Blame, punishment,
Oh, I
and so
love that
on.
page.
Right,
Yeah.
I know you do.
I keep it right here next to my desk.
So there's 16, there you go. There's 16 patterns on that page.
That's
You
it.
can look at each one of them and go, is it a priori?
Zone out, yes. Silence, yes. Blow offs, yes. Interesting. Violence, yes. Brutality, abuse, neglect. Yeah, that's interesting. The only one that it catches me is the big four theories. Damage control. That's the only one I'm iffy about.
Okay, is it human nature to want to avoid suffering?
Damage control is, but the big four is the part I get fussy. Damage control is a priori though,
Okay,
because that's in nature. I mean, I can picture bugs doing damage control.
exactly, exactly. We could say evolution is damage control,
Yeah, we could say that.
that we evolved toward damage control. What a concept. And on that note,
All right. Let's keep it.
wow, I just have to thank you. And Eric,
Thank you.
thank you for, I want you to try and take this in. Thank you for suffering in front of me honestly. Not a lot of people do that.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you.
Adios.
Have a good day.